I'm going to tell you from my point of view, follow your heart. Because if you work where your heart is, you're going to give it 100%. And if your heart's not into what you do, you'll never be happy.
All right, hello everybody, and welcome to episode 20 of Life Lessons in Combat Sports. I'm Eric Hamidi, your host as usual. Thank you guys for clicking onto the video and taking a listen. I am just gonna say this ahead of time, is that I do really appreciate this, because to me this is a very special episode, and to be perfectly honest, it's an episode that I have been looking forward to, basically for a year. I thought about this even last year in November before I even started the podcast. And then I started thinking about it once I started it at the beginning of the year. And honestly, it's just all been, it just feels as though it's been like a countdown up to this moment. And now we're finally here, and it's finally happening, where I get to talk about this thing that it's been on my mind for the entirety of 2025. And the reason why it's special to me is because, ultimately the goal that I have for this podcast is to be able to talk to the individuals who I talk about in my episodes. For instance, my very first episode, when I was talking about Steve Austin and his injury and all that stuff, thinking about gratitude or just making the most of whatever time you have, my ultimate goal would be to talk to individuals like that and see if basically they thought the same thing that I thought, as far as the life lesson or just like the meaning that I extracted from that. I'm curious to see if that's also what they were thinking, or, to be quite honest, if they were thinking of something else that I hadn't even considered, and just provide some new perspective and provides a new lesson and all that stuff. Honestly, just thinking about that, it's really exciting to me. Thinking about it right now, it's just, I really like the prospect of that. So hopefully I get a chance to do that one day. But I noted this when was it? I noted this back in February, I believe, when I was doing the Kevin Randleman episode, that unfortunately there are just some individuals who I'm never gonna get a chance to talk to, because they're now deceased. And I think some of the people that I mentioned, for instance, was Kevin Randleman or Kimbo Slice, and I mentioned a few other individuals. But to be perfectly honest, this is at the top of the list of people who fall under that category, and that is Eddie Guerrero. That's what he went through, a particular instance in his life. That's what I'm going to be talking about in this episode. That's going to be the focus of today. And I'm really looking forward to it. And just, there's a lot of things that if he were still alive, I'd want to talk to him about or ask him, and just really get more insight into who he was as a person and all this other stuff. It's just, and I guess I say that because I find his story to be fascinating, and then also as an adult, I've grown to appreciate his story even more, or just admire the things that he went through, or just kind of, it just really just boils down to the simple fact that the things that he went through have helped me as well. I'm going to go into a lot of detail about all this. I just wanted to put those things out there, and just, I think it says something about the impact of somebody who I mean, for me, I never met Eddie Guerrero, never talked to him, never will. But it doesn't take away from the fact that it's almost, I don't know, it's almost like even from beyond the grave, his story has helped or inspired me. And I can only speak from my perspective about it. And the only other thing that I'll just say real quick is that I know that I know there's criticisms about him, and to be honest, I think that they're pretty valid, or just, I know there's criticisms about, maybe just the temper that he had, or the character that he portrayed in his later years in WWE, or just the steroid abuse that he, unfortunately was forced to do given the industry at that time. But for me, I'm just extracting the good from his story, and I'm trying to like take the positives out of it. And also, from what I've seen or from what I've researched, it seems as though he was a really, I mean, of course, I can only say this based on, a outsider looking in, or just as a fan or whatever it may be, is just that he seemed like a very kind person. He seemed like a really good person, and he seemed like the kind of like a really down-to-earth person. And I mean, there's just so many people who say that he, who have such high praise for him and all that stuff. So that is the stuff that I'm going to focus on, and just I can't deny ways that his experiences have helped me out. So I just thought it would be good for me to share that with everybody. And as far as the significance of it, I'll get into detail about that later. So for now, I'll just say that Eddie Guerrero, he was born in 1967, and he grew up in a family of wrestlers. So his father, Gory Guerrero, he started out in the 1930s and was able to make a big career for himself in Mexico and all this other stuff. And the way he started was that he went he went somewhere to learn how to box, but they didn't have boxing available. They just had wrestling. So he just took it upon himself to learn that and develop his craft to the career that he had. So it's just interesting how things kind of played out as far as Gory goes. And from there, he married Eddie's mother, Herlinda. They had a bunch of kids together. So his sons also wrestled. So Eddie's brothers were Chavo Guerrero Sr., Mondo Guerrero, Hector Guerrero. They also wrestled as well. And then Eddie just followed in, he followed the family tradition. And throughout his life, he was training in wrestling and all this other stuff, and eventually he got to the point where he made his pro debut in 1987. And, we all start somewhere, so he's just working he worked a little bit in the United States from what I can tell. I know he had like a match with this one wrestler, Terry Funk, in the early days of WCW. So he had some work there, but at that time, I would say from the late 80s to the mid 90s, I would say, he kind of made it, he did. What am I talking about? He made a name for himself mostly in Mexico, and then also wrestling in this company in Japan called New Japan Pro Wrestling. He wrestled under a mask under the gimmick Black Tiger. So there was that, and then also his time in Mexico towards the end of 1994. He really made a name for himself teaming with this other wrestler named Art Barr, and together they were a tag team called Los Gringos Locos. And they were very hated people amongst the Mexican crowd. They would come out in ring attire in the American flag colors and all that stuff. So they were basically a heat magnet, as you can imagine. So that's when I mean, during all this time, Eddie is developing his craft. He's getting work wherever he can and trying to build up a little bit of a name for himself. But I would say it was at that time in 1994 when he started progressing in his career, I would say, and took the next step up or what have you. And what's kind of interesting is that as I'm talking about Eddie's career, you know, just everything he's done at everything he had done at that point, and even some of the stuff that I'm going to talk about later. I mean, it's just interesting to see how it's like a step-by-step progression, like taking the next step up the ladder, just building yourself up. And I mean, honestly, I kind of see that as a little bit of an analogy of life as well. So, you know, that's, I mean, I'll just say this real quick. This is not the only time I'm gonna do an episode or I'm gonna have an episode talking about Eddie Guerrero, because there's so much that you can take from his experiences. But it's weird because as I kind of thought about it a little bit more, I just sort of saw the similarities there, where it just like, you know, kind of like what he was doing in his career. I mean, that's kind of what we're all doing in life, I would say, as far as just trying to build up on the good things and have even greater things happen for us. Yeah, that's actually a really, I don't know, that's kind of hitting me a little bit as I'm doing this recording. Because, I mean, maybe if I had a little more time on my hands, I could sort of flush it out a little bit better, but unfortunately I don't. So let's just carry on with it. So after his time in Mexico, unfortunately, Art Barr, he passes away towards the end of 1994. And the plans for them originally was that they were going to start out together in this independent promotion in the US in the 90s called Extreme Championship Wrestling, ECW. The plan was to bring them in as a tag team and all that stuff. But unfortunately, with Art's passing, that didn't happen, and Eddie performed as a singles wrestler there. And you know, he was putting on mat classics, if you will. I mean, that's a expression that they use. He was doing, I mean, kind of like what I'm saying just a moment ago, is that he's building up his name even more so, building up his reputation and all that stuff, and really getting recognized, putting on these classics in ECW, to the point where he and a few other wrestlers, they get noticed and get an offer to go to World Championship Wrestling, WCW. And that was, I mean, up to that point in Eddie's career, that was the highest level of, I suppose mainstream success at that point in his career, because WCW was the second biggest wrestling promotion in the 90s, next to WWE, and then shortly thereafter they would actually become the number one wrestling promotion with the angle that they had, the New World Order, NWO, and but even before that, they were basically neck and neck with WWE, WWF at the time, as it was known. So with the money that was being offered and the fact that WCW was aligned with the Turner networks and all that stuff, I mean, it just made all the sense in the world for Eddie to sign with WCW. So that's what he did, and he debuted for WCW in late 1995. So he's, I mean, once again, I'm just saying this, it's weird how it keeps building up and up, and it's just like he's having more matches, getting more accolades, building up his skills even more between that time of late 1995 going into the summer of 1996. And the reason why I'm saying that is because that's when WCW began the NWO storyline, and that was the storyline that basically put them over the hump and became the top wrestling organization in the United States. And while that storyline and that angle and all that stuff, while it did a lot of good for WCW, it also kind of, I guess it caused some problems in the sense that it's almost like everything kind of took a little bit of a back seat to the NWO storyline. And what I mean by that is that was such a hot attraction, and everybody's focus was on that as far as the creative or booking management of WCW, to the point where they paid less attention to everything else, or just anything that wasn't part of the NWO storyline. It just like took a back seat, or was just, meant to just kill time in between those segments and all that stuff. And that kind of led into a little bit of a problem where as Eddie said, that first year he was in WCW was really good. And then eventually it just kind of got worn out because of management's decreased attention on their stuff. And just, he had disagreements as far as his booking, or like his character arc, how he won matches and all that stuff. And because of all those things playing a factor, that's why he became very despondent during that time. And it was at that time that he started, that was when his drug addiction and alcoholism started happening, or just that was the origin story of it, just being upset about that. And as he said in his book, he started partying more. So he's doing that for a couple years, and New Year's Eve 1998, Eddie is having a party with a bunch of family, and now we're into New Year's Day 1999. He goes out because he wants to get something to eat, and while he's doing that, he takes this drug called Renutrient, which basically makes him fall asleep at the wheel as he's driving. And he was in a very, very bad car accident that just really messed him up. I mean, from the stories that I see, is that he was going 130 miles an hour when his car crashed and everything. And it was so severe to the point that, as Eddie puts it, when the cops arrived, they left him for dead, because that's how bad it was. So miraculously, he's able to recover from that. But because of how severe that accident was, that's how his addiction and use of painkillers and all this other stuff just got worse and worse. So throughout 1999, he's dealing with recovery. He's dealing with the accident. He's dealing with recovery. He comes back to wrestle for WCW. In his words, he came back too soon. And also, towards the end of 1999, he has a couple of overdoses. As far as his career goes, he gets his release from WCW in early 2000, and then debuts for WWF, what is now WWE. And from there, what's kind of interesting about his career arc at that time is that even though his addiction and alcoholism problems, even though they were building up, something I forgot to mention is that it started in 97, and then it just kept building up and up and up. And what's crazy is that even as it was continuing to build up in the year 2000, Eddie still was able to develop his character and reach a lot and get a lot of success and just win championships and really start to hone down the charisma part of professional wrestling, if you will. But in the summer of 2001, the story goes is that there was an episode of Monday Night Raw in Minneapolis where he just showed up in no condition to work, and it was very evident that he was just totally out of it. And that was the boiling point of his addiction. So WWF, they mandate him to go to rehab, and he spends a few months in rehab and finishes the program there. So he gets out of it, but what ends up happening is that he's just struggling to stay sober. And that makes all the sense in the world, just given the fact of how difficult it is to overcome addiction problems. And I'm not saying this from any line of expertise, because I mean, it's not something I've ever went through or had to treat people for, or just all that stuff. So I don't, I'm saying this with a lot of disclaimers, in the sense that, like, I don't understand how difficult it can be to overcome it, but I can at least understand that it is a challenging thing. And also, I mean, you have to imagine that when you come out of rehab, it's sort of like, okay, you were given all the tools to try to stay sober, but now you're out in the real world and you have to try to maintain that. And he was struggling with that at that time. I mean, even after he got out of rehab, he was trying to, I mean, it was just like there was just some incidents where he still continued to drink, and sometimes they led into problems, sometimes they didn't, but it was never anything too catastrophic, or there was nothing like uh, there were no crimes being done or anything like that. It's just, I guess what he was struggling with was the fact that he thought, oh, okay, now that I know I don't want to do these bad things, or just, oh, hey, I went out, I had a drink and nothing happened. He's kind of like, oh, I can just have a drink like everybody else. But unfortunately, what ended up happening in November of 2001 was that he got a bottle of wine and he drank it. Then he went out to some bars, drank even more, and then he basically rammed his car into the gate of his community, of the apartment that he was at the time. And then he got arrested for a DUI. And, as he kind of puts it, that's like the low point of his, that was like the rock bottom moment, because he wakes up in jail and he sees that he's using a used roll of toilet paper as a pillow. And I mean, it's just interesting, like, how that was such, I mean, it doesn't get any lower than that. And I forgot to mention that during this time he was separated from his wife Vicky, and they were on the verge of a divorce and all that stuff. So it was pretty bad. I mean, it almost, I mean, I don't know, it's kind of interesting, because it almost seems like he was on the road to a tragic ending, which, I guess how his life ended, unfortunately, I mean, it ended up being a tragedy. But at least from that point, from that point on, what happened was that Eddie, he decides and is all like, okay, I'm gonna stay sober. Like, that was the turning point for him, where he's just like, okay, I need to stay sober now and all this stuff. So he does that, and unfortunately, because of the DUI, he got released from WWF. So he basically has to start working on the smaller regional shows throughout the country, independent shows or what have you, to, I guess, build his way back up. And that clip that you saw at the beginning of this episode, that is from an interview that he did, where he was talking about his career and what he was going through at the time. I mean, that interview was done in late 2001, early 2002. And I mean, what I find just on a side note before I get to like the life lesson, is just that what I find fascinating about that interview is the fact that he's doing that at the lowest point in his life. Just at, like, I can't really imagine how things could get much worse for him at the time. And I guess this is something that I thought about today before recording this episode, was the fact that it's interesting to hear, even though he was at his lowest point in his life at that time, it's just fascinating to hear how, I guess, determined he sounds. Or I don't know if determined is the right word. I mean, what's the best way to describe it? I mean, I guess it's interesting. Okay, here's what I'll say. It's fascinating to hear that even though he was at such a low point in his life, he still sounds positive to the extent that he's able to, given everything that's going on. And he is also, putting it out there as far as what he's trying to do and all this other stuff. And that line that Eddie says, where he says, follow your heart, because if you work where your heart is, you're going to give it 100%. And if your heart's not into what you do, you'll never be happy. I mean, I've seen this interview before, but what happened was that I was going through, some stuff of, I was going through my own, personal matters towards the end of last year, and just, dealing with just career stuff, just kind of like figuring out where I want to go as far as my career goes. And, I heard that, I saw that, and I can safely say there is no life lessons in combat sports without hearing that. Without hearing that piece of audio at that time, and at the point that I am or was in my life, I don't start this without hearing that or reading parts of his autobiography to motivate me to do this. Because honestly, the chapters in his book that deal with like that mid 2001 to late 2002, 2003 timeframe, I reread those chapters every now and then, because I just feel as though obviously I've never had a problem with alcoholism or just addiction issues, but the things that he talks about or what he goes through, I feel like a lot of people can take that into their own lives, or just they can extract meaning from it, and just it can be a source of inspiration, if you will. And for me, the motivation for me to do this episode is just very simply that, today is the 20-year anniversary of his passing. And to me, I sort of thought, what better way to pay tribute to somebody than to, not only do a podcast episode about him, but giving credit to the person who inspired me to do this podcast. And the reason why I say that is because of the lesson that is involved with that piece of audio. I feel like this is sort of similar to episodes I've done in the past, as far as like, you need to find what makes you happy, or just, find out what you're passionate about, or just it's important for you to be happy. And I can kind of see the similarities as far as those past episodes and then this one. But what I tried to do is figure out a new sort of perspective about it, or add something new, or just put a spin on it to, just supplement all the things that I've said in the past, and just really to give you something new. So for me, the way I interpret that line is that I think if you, I mean, when he says, okay, follow your heart, because if you work where that is, the effort will follow. And I think that is a component about that statement, is that if you do what's right by you in your heart, then you're going to put in the effort. And when things are hard, or just when things are difficult, because it's right by you and it's right by your heart, and you know you need to do that, that pushes you through the hard times. And that'll help you go through the hard times. Because, I mean, let's look at it this way. If you're, I mean, if if you're trying to draw, but that's something you're not really passionate about. I mean, for me, I sort of view it as whatever kind of hardships that you go through doing that, because it's not something that you really want to do. It just, like, any kind of like hardship you face, or any kind of like setback or anything like that, it's just very frustrating, and it just kind of like brings you down. And I don't know. I feel as though if you don't do the things that you actually want to do, then that has a way of playing out into, just everyday life, or one's everyday life, as far as, I don't know, the energy you put out there, or just the vibes you give off, or just karma, or whatever it may be. And just, I think, in the example I'm giving, is that if you're trying to get good at drawing, but it's not something that you're actually passionate about, then what ends up happening is that it just makes you a disgruntled or frustrated person, to the point where just, I don't know, I guess it has a way of permeating into other things in life. And I mean, a big thing that I sort of think about is, what's the point of going through life if you're just going to be stressed out all the time? Why not do something that you enjoy and what makes you happy? I think what I take from that is the fact that following your heart, it brings a certain amount of peace to you. And I guess it helps you be true to yourself. And I guess the way I sort of think about it is, like, you're able to make decisions depending on whatever it is you're going through, if you're doing things that feel right by you. And a way that you do that is by following your heart, to try to kind of guide you in the things that you need to do. And just, at least for me, how this is kind of playing out is that, I mean, I've been on this journey to try to figure out what kind of work I'm truly passionate about, and what I really can commit myself to. And I just sort of, I sort of feel as though I've been kind of suppressing that for a long time. And now what I'm doing is I'm embracing it more, just because, like, combat sports is a part of my life. It's a big component of, who I am as a person. And I just, like I said, I feel like I've kind of been trying to, like, downplay that for the longest time. And because I'm not following wasn't following my true passion, it just made me an unhappy person. And I guess some of this is based on the fact that there are people in my personal life who have told me that, okay, now that you're embracing this more, you're just like, you seem like a happier person. So I think for me, how this is kind of played out is that, okay, I'm passionate about combat sports. And for me, that even when I'm doing stuff related to it, whether it's like researching or doing this podcast or whatever it is, it's like, even though I'm not getting paid to do it, I can still get myself to do it. Even though it's hard work, I'm still able to get myself to do it. And I think it's just because that's where that's where the passion lies. And something I'll just kind of add for my own experience is that a couple of years ago, I kind of like had to assess what it is that what it is that I want to do, or what is a line of work that that I'm actually genuinely passionate about. And this has been a discovery process. I mean, at the time, at the beginning when this happened, I mean, I really didn't know, and it almost seemed like I was just kind of like bouncing around between some different jobs and such. And then how some of this stuff came up for the podcast, I mean, it kind of started out small where I just sort of thought about like, oh, these are questions that I would want to ask people, like these individuals, if I get the opportunity, and all that stuff, or just would I ask them these things in like Q&As. But then about a year and a half ago, I started thinking more about how can I turn this into content creation, or what kind of like content creation can I actually do, or just can I manifest this in some way? And then, I just kind of go through the things that I go about my life in 2024, and just given those kinds of things, or given what was going on at the time, it really made me assess like, I don't know, how can I become a happier person? Or just, I mean, I don't want to repeat anything I've already said, but it's kind of like one of those things where just like, why not try to be happy? Or just like, that's become a lot more important for me. And I think if you're honest about yourself as far as what you want to do or what you like to do, you're not like just trying to fit yourself in a box that you'll never fit in. I think that's a really, I don't know, I think that's a really good analogy to try to put, or a good analogy to use to illustrate this point. So I think those are a few of the things that really like what that statement means and what that whole idea really gets at. And honestly, I feel as though the idea of following your heart, and if you don't do that, then you won't be happy. I mean, honestly, that can manifest in another way too, where, not only, I mean, like, we're not always able to just do the things that we like to do or that we want to do. And I guess the example that I would use is like, a parent just having maybe a job that's not so glamorous or what have you, or, high ranking or something like that. But there is a motive to what that person, like why that person is doing it, where, I mean, I don't know, let's say somebody's working at a convenience store or as a janitor, and it's like, yeah, it's not the most, it's not the most glamorous or just like esteemed job out there, but that may be a job that somebody does in order to try to provide for their kids or to try to save up for college tuition. I mean, I don't know, whatever it may be. It may be that they're able to do that job and they're doing it so then they can attain that goal. And they know in their heart that that's the right thing to do, so they're able to do that. They're able to do the work day in and day out, and just, I mean, I think ultimately it's like, if there is a parent who's like, hey, I want to get my kid to college and I'm going to work to save up for that, that's right by them in their heart. And if they do attain the goal that they are able to afford for college, I mean, then that will make them happy. So this whole idea of just following your heart and making you happy, I mean, it plays out in a lot of different ways. And I hope I'm giving a good enough examples of it. So as far as like where Eddie is in his life, I mean, he does that interview, and then eventually he works his way back up to WWE. He gets back there and just almost has like a career renaissance where he's just getting even more getting even more popular, building more of a fan following and all this other stuff. And miraculously during that time he's able to get back with Vicky. You know, they went from being on the verge of a divorce to renewing their wedding vows. And as far as the career goes, I mean, it all just built up to the point where he became WWE champion in February of 2004, beating former WWE champion and UFC heavyweight champion Brock Lesnar, which that was like a euphoric moment that everybody was just like so happy to have happen and all that stuff. But you know, like I said, this is the 20-year anniversary of his passing. God, I really wish I could have an opportunity to talk to him. But unfortunately, on November 13th, 2005, WWE was in Minneapolis, which it's just, I don't know, it's just amazing how much Minneapolis was such a huge part of his life and career. But, you know, WWE was in Minneapolis and they were going to do a super show in the sense that they were going to do Raw and SmackDown. Like they were going to do Raw and SmackDown one right after the other, as opposed to like them being on separate nights. It's like if you bought a ticket for that event, then you got to see both shows. It's like that sort of shit. But they found Eddie in his hotel room, and when that happened, they, like any kind of storylines that WWE had at that time, they just put it on hold to do a tribute show for him. And with that being said, I have a little memento that I want to share with y'all. Hang on, give me a second. So, this is his obituary that I cut out from the LA Times the day after he died. This is a thing that I've kept ever since then. Yeah, it's crazy right there. I've had this thing for 20 years. And I mean, it's just something that, I mean, it's not something that I'm going to ever get rid of or just... It's interesting how much his passing is still like impactful, or just people still think about like how tragic it was and how hard it is to deal with and just all this other stuff. And I don't know, I find that year I find 2005 interesting because it's just, there's a lot of people in my life who I didn't even know them back then. So it's just kind of interesting how things played out, or just like, it's just interesting to see like what was in store for my life at that time, or just after that. And I guess I just say that because it's like being around certain individuals, like friends of mine or family members, who just help me embrace this side of myself. What I find interesting about that is that, you know, this was back in 2005, and we weren't, like, the world didn't revolve around the internet as much as it does now. So news didn't travel as quickly. And, there were no iPhones or anything like that. So you could kind of be in the dark about these things. And that's kind of what happened with me, because I remember on that day I had a piano recital that I was getting ready for. It was, during the daytime, and it was my brothers and I, we were gonna play during that. My mom took us to that, and my dad was out of town on a business trip. So I spend the day getting ready for that, and then we go to the recital, we do that, and then afterwards we're gonna go have dinner at this restaurant called Hamburger Hamlet. And it wasn't until 5 p.m. that day that I found out, because like my brother, he was just online, and then calls me over, and then I see that article. And what I find kind of interesting is that, like, even back then, I still view, like, even back then, I was sad that he passed away, but it's almost as if, as an adult, it's enhanced a lot more. And I think that's just because as I've gotten older, I've learned about the type of person that he was. And, wrestling was a huge part of Eddie's life. And, I can kind of, I relate to that because it is such a big part of my life too. And despite whatever criticisms you may have about him, his in-ring work was just phenomenal. And just in a way, I kind of feel as though he embodied everything that I wanted to see, or that I liked in a wrestling match, or just with professional wrestling and all that other stuff. So I think it's safe to say that my appreciation for him has, increased as I've gotten older. Yeah, I don't know. I'm like looking at this obituary that's on the table in front of me, and it just sort of making me think about, friends of mine in the past who just, I don't know, when I look at that, it just brings up, memories of, friends of mine even. It's just I want to stay on the positive, or, talk about the positives about him. It just sucks that he's able to get his life in order and just stay sober for the remainder of his life, at the time where that interview took place, but he only got to live another 4 years. The cause of death was a heart failure, and that was due to, the steroid abuse, or, all that stuff that he was doing at the time. And just, that was just the nature of the industry at the time that he was working, where you had to look a certain way, or, be a certain size, and just the work schedule was just grueling, and it just, really broke his body down. So, all of those were just, a recipe for disaster. I think what I appreciate a lot about his story and his experiences is just that it's really helped me out quite a lot. And maybe down the line, once, other things kind of like, I guess once other things settle in my life, or just once whatever like things I'm experiencing right now, or whatever kind of problems I may be going through, like once those, play out the way they are, and like the result is finalized and all that stuff, maybe it's like I can talk about how his story helped me out, even in those situations. But even without that, just everything that's happened so far, it's, helped me out tremendously. I really do wish that he was still alive today. there's a lot of meaning and stuff like that that I can extract from his story. A few months after he passed away, he got inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame, and it was accepted by Vicky. And while it's a shame that, once again, Eddie is somebody who, unfortunately, I'm just never going to get a chance to talk to, I think my way of paying tribute or, paying homage is that for anyone who knew him, his friends, his family, I mean, in particular, Vicky, his daughters, Shawl, Sherilyn, and Kaylee Marie, it's like you can kind of know, or kind of like maybe it just brings them some, joy or peace or solace, just knowing that that's the one of the ways that I remember him, or just like the type of impact that he's able to have. And just, what I find really amazing is the fact that even 20 years after his passing, he still has some kind of an impact on individuals. I think that's very nice and commendable or admirable and all that stuff. What's kind of interesting is that very recently it was announced that Sherilyn Guerrero started training to become a wrestler. She's at this. There's this one wrestler, Booker T. He has a school. She's starting working over there. So it's gonna be interesting to see how that kind of plays out, or just what becomes of her career and all that stuff. I guess time will tell. But I guess, like, if this does get out to those individuals, also Chavo Guerrero Jr., who's Eddie Guerrero's nephew, it's like, I don't know, maybe if this gets to them, they can kind of, I'm just trying to express what this individual has done for me, or just like how it's helped me, and just all that other stuff. I don't know, I might do another episode talking about this. We'll see what happens, just because, like, there's a lot to say. Just, I don't know, it's a little trippy how much time has, kind of passed. It's like, I can't believe it. I mean, it's just like time flies, or you just like, I can remember what it was like at that time when, like, the news first broke and all that stuff, and just, I think it's interesting how relatable Eddie's story is. I guess one thing that I'll just say really quick is that for me, how that situation impacted me is like, okay, why not try to be happy, and just why not do things that align with that happiness, or just that facilitate it, so then that way you're a happier person, you're a healthier person, you feel more fulfilled, all this other stuff. And I don't know, I kind of reached a point where that's what I thought I should do. So, like I said, I don't think there's a better way that I can, pay tribute to somebody than just saying that, yeah, there is no life lessons in combat sports without it. And the reason why that happened, I mean, like, in addition to that, just really quick, I'll say that it also happened because I wanted to take the knowledge that I have here and try to use that to, like, help individuals. And, hopefully this was helpful for you as well. And I hope you got you got something out of it. And yeah, I mean, Here's to Eddie Guerrero. One of, if not my favorite wrestler of all time. Really on just like a personal, I guess, like just as much on a personal level as far as like the person he was than, you know, anything that he did in wrestling. That's all I have for you at this time. Just wanted to take a note. I just wanted to take a moment to celebrate his career and his life and all that stuff. So thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know what you think about it in the comments section. You can subscribe to my videos, and then also if you want to follow me on social media, I'm on Instagram, Life and Combat Sports, and I really enjoyed doing this. And catch you guys on the next one. See ya.